Have you ever wondered why certain men are remembered, not for their wealth or power, but for the quiet strength of their hearts and the way they love? In this unforgettable story, we journey to a remote village tucked in the hills of Izmir, where age-old wisdom still shapes the deepest forms of connection. What the elders there reveal isn't just about romance. It's about how one simple, sincere act of love and respect can transform not just a relationship, but an entire community. This is a powerful lesson in emotional integrity, the kind of devotion that builds legacy. You won't look at love the same way again. Let me introduce myself. My name is Karen. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on today's topic. If you enjoy the content, please comment 1 below if it doesn't resonate with you. Leave a 0. Our feedback is crucial as it helps me create better videos that align with your interests. I'm about to share with you will not only open your eyes but also help you understand the subtleties of what a woman truly wants. When she talks to you, we're going to go much deeper than you can imagine. In the soft, golden light of an early autumn morning, a group of curious young villagers made their way along a winding path, leaves rustling underfoot. Their destination was the modest home of an elder known affectionately as Madame Lara, a woman of 72 years whose gentle spirit and radiant wisdom had become legendary in Izmir. With her snow-white hair swept back neatly and eyes that gleamed with the brilliance of untold stories, she welcomed the young seekers with warmth that only years of compassion could bestow. The group gathered around a weathered wooden table that stood like a silent witness to decades of shared meals and sacred conversations. As the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Madame Lara began to speak, not in lectures or sermons, but in stories. Her words flowed like a gentle stream, drawing the listeners into a world where emotional connection was held as sacred, and love was expressed through mindful presence rather than grand gestures. One of the more inquisitive young men, his gaze filled with curiosity and courage, posed a question that carried weight beyond its surface. He asked not simply about the nature of physical closeness between partners, but about the deeper meaning behind those intimae expressions, those quiet moments that seem small but speak volumes. Madame Lara, smiling knowingly, nodded in approval. This, she said, was a question worth exploring. She began her response not with facts, but with a tale, one passed down from her grandmother and many generations before. It spoke of a tradition among the village's ancestors, one not rooted in the physical alone but in emotional reverence. She explained that certain gestures of affection, though often dismissed or misunderstood in modern times, were once considered sacred, a way for a man to honor the divine essence of the woman he loved. These actions were seen as acknowledgments of life itself, celebrating the role of the feminine as a giver of life, nurturer, and spiritual equal. Men who understood this were not only admired for their wisdom, but revered for their devotion. They didn't seek power or control in their relationships. Instead, they offered tenderness, patience, and presence. Their love was quiet but enduring, rooted in emotional intimacy that transcended the physical. Such men were regarded not as ordinary husbands or companions, but as protectors of something far greater, the emotional sanctity of their homes. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting a soft amber glow across the village, the conversation grew deeper. The young listeners leaned in, captivated not only by the stories themselves, but by the emotion behind them, the reverence with which Madame Lara spoke, the way her voice trembled with memory and meaning. These were not lessons from textbooks, but from a life lived in awareness of what truly matters. If you are still watching this video, she might have said if speaking to us now, and these lessons speak to something within you, comment the number 1 below. Let me know you're walking this path of reflection with us. Madame Lara went on to explain that the gestures of respect and love between partners were seen as vital threads in the fabric of community. When a man honored his partner through sincere, attentive acts, listening with care, offering comfort without condition, standing beside her in times of hardship, it strengthened not just their relationship, but the village as a whole. These were not empty customs, but living expressions of harmony, passed on with reverence, intended to endure. She shared how in older days such acts of devotion were deeply symbolic. They were about acknowledging the sacred energy of the person one shared a life with. The gesture itself was not the end, but the beginning, a doorway into a relationship built on shared respect, quiet joy, and enduring connection. It was about creating safety, peace, and warmth in a world that could often feel cold and uncertain. As dusk fell and the flickering candlelight danced across the faces of the youth, one could almost feel time standing still. The tales shared by Madame Lara became more than stories. They became lessons, reminders that love, in its truest form, is never rushed, never shallow. It grows through presence. It endures through care. It deepens through listening. In that moment, it was clear that something had shifted. The young villagers were no longer merely listening. They were learning. They were beginning to see that true affection wasn't a series of acts performed out of duty, but a choice made again and again, in small but significant ways. They would leave her home later that evening changed, not because of any grand revelation, but because they had been reminded of something timeless, that the real strength of a relationship lies in its foundation of respect, patience, and selfless love. If you're still with us and these ideas have sparked something within you, comment the number 2 below. These interactions help us know which parts of the story resonate most and encourage us to keep creating thoughtful, meaningful content. In the next part of our journey, we'll meet one of the village's eldest storytellers, who expands on these teachings and shares how such quiet gestures once shaped entire families, and still can today. We'll uncover how traditions like these bring people closer, not just in marriage, but in community. So stay with us, because this story has only just begun. And remember, the most profound expressions of love are often the quietest, offered not in haste, but with heart. As the winds carried the scent of cedar, and the evening stars began their slow emergence above the rooftops of Izmir, the group of young villagers still stirred by Madame Lara's teachings felt an irresistible urge to seek out more. The hunger for understanding had grown within them, not simply to know, but to become. They weren't chasing novelty. They were searching for roots. Drawn by the whispers of village lore, they made their way to the edge of the hamlet, where a modest home stood surrounded by olive trees and wild thyme. There lived Helio, one of the village's oldest and most respected elders, a man whose voice, though softened by age, carried the force of experience and memory. As the youths approached, Helio greeted them with a calm presence, his hands calloused yet gentle, his eyes reflecting both the trials and triumphs of a well-lived life. He welcomed them into his home, where the fireplace blazed not only for warmth, but for tradition. It had long been a space where stories were passed down, where young hearts were molded not by lectures, but by shared reflection. As everyone settled in, Helio leaned back and let the flicker of the flames dance across his face. His voice, raspy but full of calm conviction, began to rise above the quiet hum of the night. "You see," he began, "what Madame Lara spoke of is not a custom in the ordinary sense. It is a mirror that reflects the kind of man one is willing to become. To honor your partner in ways that are thoughtful and selfless, whether in word, touch, or silence, is not weakness. It is the strongest act a man can choose." Helio paused, watching the group with affection before continuing. He explained that, in his youth, men in the village often came home from the fields not just weary from labor, but yearning to reconnect with their wives, not just physically, but emotionally. After a day spent under the sun, their greatest desire was not rest, but restoration through closeness. They knew that building a life with someone required more than daily routines. It demanded attention, appreciation, and effort. These men did not wait for anniversaries or holidays to show love. They built love in everyday moments, in the way they greeted their wives at the door, in the way they prepared her tea without being asked, or how they simply sat and listened at the end of a long day. These gestures, though modest, carried the weight of sincerity. "If you're still here," Helio would have said in today's digital world, "and this resonates with you, comment number 3 below. Let us know you're walking this journey of rediscovery with us." He continued with a story of his own. As a younger man, he once struggled to understand why his father always insisted on serving his mother the first portion of the evening meal. It seemed like a small thing. But over time, Helio realized it was part of something greater, a rhythm of love, a culture of respect. He wanted to remind her that she mattered, Helio said, eyes moistening at the memory, that in his world, she was the first thought, not the afterthought. The young villagers listened, their faces glowing not just from the fire, but from newfound understanding. They weren't just hearing a tale from long ago. They were seeing possibilities for their own lives. In Helio's warmth, they sensed the truth, that the soul of a relationship is nourished not by grand acts alone, but by the steady consistency of small, loving gestures. And so, as the flames crackled and shadows played on the walls, the lessons unfolded, lessons that transcended culture or generation. The message was clear. To love someone deeply is to see them clearly, to honor their spirit, and to be present in ways that require humility, empathy, and heart. When the youths left Helio's home that evening, the moon above Izmir seemed to shine more brightly, as if blessing the insights they had gathered. But what stirred most was not the moonlight. It was the realization that love, real love, is a daily choice. And that emotional closeness, expressed through small, caring gestures, is one of the most powerful choices anyone can make. In the days and weeks that followed, something remarkable began to shift in the village. The stories shared by Madame Lara and Helio spread like a gentle breeze across Izmir. Young men began to reflect more deeply on how they treated their partners. They spoke with more attentiveness. They listened not just to respond, but to understand. They offered affection, not as obligation, but as joyful giving. The younger generation, often thought to be too distracted for tradition, found something beautiful in this revival. They began to see that honoring your partner wasn't about outdated rituals or hollow performance. It was about creating a haven within your relationship, a place of peace, honesty, and trust. And the women of Izmir, they noticed. They felt the difference. These were not romantic gestures for show, but sincere acts of devotion. A hand held during a difficult moment, a word of gratitude after a simple meal, a quiet reassurance when the world outside seemed overwhelming. These were the moments that mattered. These were the roots of enduring connection. What once may have been seen as private or too subtle to celebrate became the very fabric of community health. The respect shown between partners in their homes rippled outward into the village. Children grew up witnessing kindness. Neighbors supported one another more freely. A spirit of gentleness took hold. Even Madame Lara and Helio, seasoned as they were, felt renewed joy watching their teachings come to life. They knew that the legacy of love was being passed on, not just in words, but in action. And in those quiet, steady actions, Izmir flourished. In time, the simple gestures once spoken of as tradition became something more. They became daily habits. They became the standard, and they became sacred, not because of their origin, but because of their impact. If you've stayed with us this far, comment number 4 below. It tells us you're still walking this path with us, still absorbing the wisdom that, while ancient, feels more urgent than ever. Dear listener, let this story be more than something you watch or hear. Let it be something you live. The teachings from Izmir are not reserved for one village or one time. They belong to all of us. In our fast-paced, often disconnected world, what could be more revolutionary than bringing patience, kindness, and thoughtful care into your relationship? And so we end this tale not with a conclusion, but with a question. What will you choose to do with this wisdom? Will you make space in your life to honor the emotional and spiritual bond between you and those you love? Will you offer your attention without distraction, your presence without condition? If this story has touched your heart, we invite you to share one takeaway in the comments, something you've learned that you want to bring into your relationships. Was it the idea of honoring your partner through everyday acts? Was it the strength and softness? Or maybe it was simply a reminder that real love is built in quiet moments of care. Before you go, please remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell so you'll always know when we release more stories like this. We're committed to sharing messages that elevate, inspire, and restore the beauty of human connection. And finally, comment number 5 if you're still with us. That one last number tells us you've been here the whole way through, listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. Thank you for being part of this journey. May you carry the light of Izmir's wisdom into every relationship you touch. And may you always remember, true love is not a moment. It is a practice, one that begins again every day.